Welcome to the last Monster Monday of the year, the best way to finish it all off. I'll be taking a break in January to work on setting up a Patreon, but before I go, I'm leaving you with one more collaboration with Cameron McLeod. Inspired by Horizon Zero Dawn, here's the sharky cybernetic slasher, the Shearfin. One of the neat things about the Horizon setting, in my opinion, is that a lot of the machines are made with a purpose or a reason beyond just being malevolent murder mecha. There's a why to their existence from before they decided to start doing all that, and some of them even keep carrying on with that purpose. In the case of the Shearfin and its hard-headed cousin the Strikefin, it was made to break up and ultimately melt down trash in the ocean, the idea of which is based on tiger sharks. They've adapted the tactics that they use for that to terrorize folks that dare to intrude upon their drenched domain. I'm building these at level 9 just to keep with Cam's design, which puts them at the same level as the Megalodon, which is another shark, but one that has quite a bit of size on the Shearfin. And unlike that shark, these fin fiends feature the construct, robot, and tech traits, rather than the animal and aquatic traits that you traditionally see on sharks. However, like the sharks that it is based on, strength is the Shearfin's primary ability score with a high bonus, and it is followed by its constitution at a moderate value. These burly bots are all about bashing into victims, which leads to me using those higher values here rather than for its low dexterity and wisdom. It's remaining until scores are even lower as a nearly mindless machine, and that low wisdom does lead to it using a merely moderate perception. This is also based on the idea that as bots that primarily predate on piles of rubbish, they don't exactly need a high perception. However, they are outfitted with dark vision and some olfactory sensors on par with a proper shark. Beyond that, they feature a moderate athletics score as their sole skill, mainly to aid them in swimming in choppier waters. Sharks typically also make use of stealth and survival, but I refrain from using those here because the Shearfin doesn't exactly need those to hunt down trash. For the defenses of this denizen of the deep, we'll actually start off with a moderate armor class, which does harken back a bit to his low dexterity. On the other hand, its moderate constitution influences the use of high hit points. I actually went back and forth on this one a bit, but ultimately decided to let the ability scores lead me in the direction that they wanted to go. With its movement abilities, the Shearfin might be a bit of a skirmisher, but hopefully its stats aren't too disruptive. It does have the whole host of construct immunities, but also features resistances and weaknesses inspired by Cam's design. Naturally, it does also have components that are at a bit below extreme AC, and mainly disable a number of its actions that we'll be looking at shortly. We do have to talk about its saving throws first, which start with a high fortitude and again end up following its ability scores, which means that its slightly lower dexterity leads into a moderate reflex. However, while its wisdom equals its dexterity, I went with a low will save. It is after all a machine with the most rudimentary of minds that's more like that of an animal than anything else. The Shearfin is limited to melee strikes, which includes a fin and jaws attack. The first of these resembles the bladed fins along its body, which don't feel dexterous enough to warrant the use of the agile trait, but I still wanted them to have some value, some reason that the GM would want to use them rather than its jaws in some cases. As such, they use a high attack bonus, along with moderate damage, whereas those fearsome jaws that it possesses have a moderate attack bonus with high damage. Though, these jaws do come with the fatal trait to spice them up just a bit. Outside of that, the Strikefin variant has a head strike as well, which uses the same values as its jaws, but comes with the raising trait, letting it bash and break apart trash, shields, or bones that get in its way. First up in our array of abilities is a tactic I pulled from sharks both in-game and in real life, Breach. This allows a Shearfin to leap from the waters to catch prey that get too close to the surface, even if they're above it. This is one of several abilities to mix movement with other effects, and that might end up making the Shearfin a bit more of a skirmisher than I originally intended. Now, as for representing some of the actual abilities that Cam had, his D&D version of it had an ability to increase its damage if it moved first. I don't think this concept entirely works as a passive effect in 2E, where they suggest not using invisible abilities. so I translated it into Fanged Frenzy. This has some similar designs to the legs of Powerful Charge, but mainly for action and variety, I wanted this to be a single action. Between this and its own considerable speed, I ended up ramping up the distance it needed to travel to be able to achieve the effects of this to 30 feet. Obviously this also has the Flourish trait, and I think those aspects balance out the almost extreme damage that this attack inflicts if it hits. Yet another moon-based power can be found in the form of Torpedo Rush. This is pulled from Cam's version, but adapted slightly. It has some similarities to the Nightmare and its Scallop, which I feel like I reference a lot, but rather than dealing standard damage, it inflicts persistent bleed damage with a high DC save, taking at least a little inspiration from that classic Kurosawa cut. Notably, this is exclusive to the Shearfin. In the case of the Strike Fin, it brings its battering body to bear to potentially stun targets, and thus requires a Fortitude save rather than a Reflex save to dodge the Dicing Dash. Cam built a cooldown on this effect, but I didn't feel like it really needed that, so instead I made this 2 actions and added that it can be disabled by breaking its propulsion engine components. For the last of the abilities that are also on the D&D version of this creature, we have Hydrojet. I noticed that there wasn't a cooldown on this effect, and I did seek to stay true to that design this time around, which means that this deals unlimited use area damage at a high DC. One thing I did change is that Cam had this be a cone, but I switched it to a line, just because that makes more sense to me for a pressure jet than a cone does. This also reminds me of an archer fish, firing on prey to knock them around in the water to make them easier targets. While that was the last effect that Cam introduced, I did want to come up with something that took advantage of the acid that the Shearfin typically uses to melt down garbage that it eats. This comes through in the form of Acid Flush, which also takes a little inspiration from the standard shark's Savage power. But rather than dealing some extra flat damage, this inflicts persistent acid damage accompanied by the Enfeebled 1 condition. For a quick note on that, I do want to mention that since the Shearfin is an underwater threat, this acid cannot simply be washed out with water. Some of the folks on Discord were worried about this making it a little too potent, but between then and now, I did end up switching the Shearfin's jaws to a moderate bonus, making this harder to trigger, and reduce the enfeebled value. Nevertheless, mixing persistent acid and bleed damage can certainly be a potent combo as the heroes struggle to get their sea legs under them. We are finally finished with this Foul-Finned Fiend. A terror tucked in the tides, this trash-tearing tool takes to traumatizing teams that trespass on his turf with toothsome tactics. I will be honest, I don't run much in the way of underwater combat, and I didn't get a chance to test this guy out. So maybe my design might be a little bit off this time around. I do still think this is a fun creature, especially to make, and having a few of these receive a smaller boat in the waters as trash that they have to break up could be a fun way to introduce them to the players who have to try and defend their boat. Also consider that these sharks are not limited to oceans. You can easily add them as threats in rivers and other bodies of fresh water. Let me know what you think of this creature and what other sorts of monsters you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, be sure to leave a like and then subscribe to the channel. And check out the Patreon once we got that up. You can also check out the blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, have a Merry Christmas, and some happy holidays.
Let us all say the pledge. I am a nice shark, not a mindless eating machine.